The stars belonged to the Ancient Ones, or so they believed for 3,000 years. The Galactic Council had ruled over 200 civilized worlds with laws that seemed fair and orders that appeared just. The Velkari wrote the codes with their elegant six-fingered hands. The Toon Collective calculated resource distribution with mathematical precision. And the Zephyrim oldest of all watched from their crystal towers and nodded their approval. When votes were cast and decisions were made, humanity arrived 50 years ago, stumbling into this ordered galaxy with crude fusion drives and wide-eyed wonder. The Council had seen newcomers before. Young species always came eventually, drawn by the promise of knowledge and the safety of numbers in a dangerous universe. Ambassador Chun stood in the great hall of the Council that first day, her voice trembling as she spoke of Earth's dreams and humanity's hope for friendship among the stars. The Velkari had smiled with their lipless mouths and granted humanity provisional membership with restrictions that seemed reasonable at the time. Humans could settle 12 worlds. No more humans could maintain a defense fleet of exactly 300 vessels. Humans could reproduce according to carefully calculated quotas that prevented resource strain on the galactic economy. Chun had signed the agreements because what choice did humanity have? They were children at the adults' table, grateful just to have a seat. The decades that followed seemed to prove the Council right. Humans were useful in ways the ancient species had forgotten how to be. They worked in the deep mines where the elegant Velkari refused to soil themselves. They fixed broken machinery with an intuitive touch that baffled the mathematical Toon. They even fought as mercenaries in the border disputes that the civilized species needed resolved, but wouldn't dirty their own hands with. Captain Maria Rodriguez remembered those years well. She had commanded a human engineering crew on Velkar Prime itself, the gleaming homeworld where towers of silver reached into purple skies, and the inhabitants spoke in musical tones about the beauty of order. "You humans are so passionate," her Velkari supervisor had told her once, the words carrying a mix of amusement and contempt, "so emotional and unrefined. But your hands build well enough." Maria had smiled and continued her work, swallowing the insult because that's what humans did in those days. They smiled and worked and tried to prove they belonged. The colony ships launched from Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning, 7 massive vessels, each one carrying the dreams of 10,000 families. Children laughed in the observation decks as Earth shrank behind them. Parents held infants and whispered about the new world waiting ahead. Teenagers complained about the long journey the way teenagers always did. New Horizon was supposed to be humanity's 13th colony world, a planet with blue oceans and green continents that looked almost like home. The Council had never approved it. Ambassador Chun received the first transmission 3 weeks into the colony ship's journey. Her hands shook as she read the formal notice from the Velkari Enforcement Division. "Humanity has exceeded allocated expansion parameters," the message stated in cold, precise language. "Immediate correction is required to maintain galactic resource balance." Chun ran through the embassy halls, her heart pounding, her mind refusing to accept what she was reading. She burst into the council chamber without permission, breaking a dozen protocols, her voice rising to a shout that echoed off the ancient walls. "Those are children!" She screamed at the assembled representatives. 50,000 children, you can't. The Velkari counselor raised one elegant hand, cutting her off with a gesture that had silenced 1,000 appeals before. "The law is clear," he said, his musical voice carrying no emotion at all. "Your species was allocated 12 worlds. You have attempted to claim a 13th. The correction must be made." Chun fell to her knees, something no human ambassador had ever done before, begging with words that came from somewhere deep and desperate. "Please. We'll bring them back. We'll destroy the ships ourselves if you want. Just let the children live." The vote took 6 hours. 847 species voted yes to enforcement action, their representatives citing precedent and legal codes and resource management theories. 12 species abstained, unwilling to vote for death, but too afraid to vote against the Council's will only. One species voted no, the humans themselves. Their voice counted and then ignored. The Valkyrie fleet intercepted the colony ships in deep space, far from any inhabited system where witnesses might complicate the official narrative. Captain Rodriguez watched the live feed from Earth, her face frozen in an expression that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. The children never knew what happened. The Valkyrie used weapons that were quick and clean, turning the massive ships into expanding clouds of debris in instants of blinding light. 50,000 voices silenced 50,000 futures. Erased the official council statement released an hour later. Called it a regrettable but necessary enforcement of established law, and reminded all member species that order must be maintained for the benefit of the galactic community. Earth went silent, not the silence of acceptance or mourning alone, but something deeper and more complete. Human workers walked off their jobs on 1,000 alien worlds without explanation. Human ships retreated to the 12 permitted colonies. Human ambassadors stopped attending council sessions. Valkyrie councilor seemed pleased when he addressed the assembly a week later. The human emotional display will pass, he assured the gathered representatives. We have seen this before with other young species. They rage for a time, then they accept reality and return to their place in the natural order. The Toon Collective ran probability calculations that supported this assessment. 94% chance of human compliance within 1 standard year. The Zephyrim said nothing, watching from their crystal towers with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall for 10,000 years. If they noticed something different in humanity's silence, something dangerous in the way human space had gone completely dark, they chose not to share their concerns. 6 months past, the galaxy continued turning. Trade routes adjusted around the missing human workers. The council moved on to other matters that seemed more important. None of them understood what they had done. None of them knew what was coming in the dark spaces between the stars. Humanity was changing. Grief was transforming into something the ancient species had forgotten existed. Something primitive and terrible and absolutely inevitable. Vengeance was coming, carried on human ships that were being built in shipyards that worked day and night without rest. The galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs, and the stars themselves would burn before humanity forgave what had been done to their children. The silence from human space stretched into weeks, then months, and the galaxy began to notice trade stations that had relied on human mechanics sat empty and broken. Mining operations deep in asteroid fields ground to a halt without the workers who had descended into the dark without fear. Even the Valkyrie found themselves struggling with systems they had long ago delegated to lesser species, who actually understood how things worked. Ambassador Chun never returned to the council chambers. Her last transmission was a simple message that every human on every council world received simultaneously. Come home. They came. 20 million humans abandoned their posts and their contracts and their lives on alien worlds, streaming back toward the 12 permitted colonies in a great migration that clogged the trade routes and caused the council's bureaucrats to file complaints about disruption of normal commerce. The Valkyrie counselor stood before the assembly and spoke with the confidence of someone who had seen this play out before. Let them sulk in their territories, he said, his musical voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. They will discover that isolation brings poverty, and poverty brings compliance. Within a year, they will be begging to return to their positions, and we will accept them back with appropriate penalties for their childish behavior. The Toon Collective presented updated calculations. The economic pressure on human worlds would become critical in 8 months. assuming no change in current resource flow patterns, but the calculations were wrong because they were based on what the Council thought they knew about humanity. And the Council didn't know humans at all. General Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the orbital shipyard above Earth, watching the construction below with eyes that hadn't slept properly in weeks. "How many?" he asked his chief engineer without looking away from the viewport. 2,000 combat vessels completed, the engineer replied, checking her datapad. "Another 5,000 in various stages of construction. We'll hit 10,000 within 6 months if we maintain current production rates." "Maintain them," Webb said, his voice carrying the kind of cold certainty that came from a decision made and accepted. "And then double them." The engineer hesitated, which was rare for her. "Sir, the resource drain, we're converting everything. Civilian infrastructure, commercial vessels, even the colony ships we were building for future expansion." "We won't need colony ships," Webb interrupted, still watching the construction. "Not where we're going." Earth had become a fortress and a factory. Every orbital platform that had once built peaceful exploration vessels now churned out warships with designs that would have horrified the Council if they had known humanity had signed treaties agreeing to maintain only 300 defensive vessels. Those treaties were written by species who believed in laws and order and the sanctity of agreements. Those species had never murdered human children on Mars. The AI research facilities that had operated under strict Council limitations now ran unrestricted. Their quantum processors developing tactical algorithms that would make a toon strategist weep with either ration or horror doctor. Sarah Kim worked 18-hour days in the laboratory, watching her creations learn and adapt and grow beyond anything the Council permitted. "They're beautiful," she whispered to her colleague one night, watching the tactical simulations run through scenarios at speeds that human minds couldn't follow. "And they're absolutely merciless." The Council banned AI warfare research, her colleague reminded her nervously. Kim laughed, a sound with no humor in it at all. "The Council slaughtered 50,000 children," she said, turning back to her work. "I don't care what they banned. In the asteroid belt, factories that had mined ice and rock for construction now processed different materials entirely. Titanium and carbon weave and exotic alloys that could withstand the stress of weapons humanity hadn't deployed since the wars that nearly destroyed Earth centuries ago. Captain Rodriguez supervised the weapons development personally, standing in observation rooms and watching tests that turned asteroids into vapor. "The Council species fight wars like chess games," she told her weapons team during one demonstration. "Elegant maneuvers, strategic positioning, minimal casualties. They haven't fought a real war in 1,000 years." She pulled up footage of the colony ship's destruction, forcing her team to watch it again, even though they had all seen it 100 times. "We're not playing chess," she continued, her voice hard as the steel being forged in the foundries below. "We're teaching them what happens when you make humans stop caring about tomorrow." The transformation of human society happened faster than any sociologist would have predicted. Every human who had ever served in a military found themselves recalled to service. Every civilian with technical skills was drafted into the war machine. Every child old enough to understand was taught what had been done and why it could never be forgotten. On the colony world of Nova Terra, millions of citizens stood in the central square, watching the memorial broadcast. 50,000 names read aloud, one after another, for 18 hours straight. When the last name was spoken, the crowd didn't cheer or cry. They simply turned and walked to the recruitment centers that had appeared on every street corner. The Valkyrie didn't notice. They were too busy dealing with their own problems, now that human workers had vanished 6 months and 3 days after the colony ships died. The Council received a transmission that came from Earth, from the office that had once belonged to Ambassador Chun. The woman who appeared on screen wore a military uniform now, and her eyes held something that made even the Valkyrie counselor pause. The council will provide reparations for the inconvenience of the enforcement action, she read from a prepared statement. Her voice flat and official. Humanity is required to deliver resource compensation in the amount of. The transmission cut off every human vessel in council space, activated simultaneously. What the council had assumed were retreating merchant ships suddenly revealed weapons that shouldn't exist and targeting systems that locked onto military installations with precision that came from months of careful planning. The Valkyrie enforcement vessel that had been sent to Earth to collect the demanded tribute never made it back. Its wreckage was found 3 days later, orbiting Earth's moon in a decaying trajectory. And written across its hull in letters 50 meters high was a message in the common galactic script. You killed our children. Now learn what happens when you wake the sleeping dragon. The council emergency session convened within hours. Representatives flooding the chamber in a state of panic that none of them had experienced in their long, comfortable lives. This is an act of war. The Valkyrie counselor shouted, his musical voice turning shrill. They must be subdued immediately. The Toon Collective was already running combat projections, probability matrices that showed overwhelming council superiority in every category. More ships, better weapons, superior technology, but their calculations couldn't account for the one variable that mattered most. Humanity didn't care about winning. Humanity cared about making the galaxy bleed. General Webb stood on Earth, looking up at stars that had once seemed full of promise, and gave the order that would change galactic history. All fleets, he transmitted, his words carrying to 10,000 warships hidden in the dark spaces between worlds. Commence Operation Reckoning. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you taught humanity that kindness was weakness, and the lesson would be written in fire. The first strike came at dawn on 40 worlds simultaneously, and the Valkyrie never saw it coming. Their defense fleets were still scrambling when human warships dropped out of dark space, appearing from nowhere with targeting solutions already locked and weapons already hot. Commander James Park led the assault on the Valkyrie military staging ground at Talos 4. His fleet of 200 vessels faced a Valkyrie force 3 times their size. Ships that were larger and more heavily armed and built by a civilization that had been designing warships for millennia. None of it mattered. All ships, weapons-free, Park transmitted, and the human fleet opened fire. The Valkyrie expected elegant formations, strategic positioning, the careful dance of civilized warfare where ships maneuvered for advantage in battles, unfolded over days of tactical exchanges. Instead, they got chaos. Human ships didn't form lines or maintain formations. They scattered like a swarm of angry hornets, each vessel operating independently, but with perfect coordination provided by eye networks that processed battlefield data faster than any organic mind could comprehend. Valkyrie flagship attempted to target the human command ship, following standard doctrine that said eliminating the leader would create confusion. There was no command ship. Every human vessel was autonomous, every captain empowered to make decisions, every crew trained to continue fighting, even if completely cut off from support. A Valkyrie cruiser fired its main plasma cannon at a human destroyer, a shot that should have vaporized the smaller ship. The human vessel rolled at the last instant, the plasma beam missing by meters. And then 3 more human ships appeared from different vectors and tore the cruiser apart with mass kinetic fire. They fight like predators, a Valkyrie tactical officer whispered, watching his screens fill with contact markers that moved in ways that seemed random but achieved devastating results. Not soldiers, predators. The battle for Talos 4 lasted 6 hours when it ended. The Valkyrie fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage, and the human ships were already jumping to their next target. Park stood on his bridge, Watching casualty reports scroll across his screen, 47 human ships destroyed, 3,000 crew lost, 3,000 more deaths to add to the 50,000 children. And Park felt nothing but grim satisfaction that the price was being paid. "Set course for Valkar Prime," he ordered, and his crew obeyed without hesitation. The Valkyrie homeworld was supposed to be untouchable, protected by the most powerful defense fleet in the galaxy. Orbital fortresses that could crack planets, minefields that stretched for millions of kilometers, sensor networks that detected any approaching vessel long before it could threaten the world below. General Webb's fleet came at them from 4 different vectors, timing their arrival to the second. "Launch kinetic spreads," Webb ordered, and thousands of missiles erupted from human ships. But these weren't explosive warheads or plasma charges. They were solid slugs of depleted uranium. Accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, the Valkyrie point defense systems opened fire, tracking and destroying the incoming projectiles with the precision expected from their advanced technology. They killed 90% of the human missiles before impact. 10% was enough. The kinetic impacts on the orbital fortresses released energy equivalent to nuclear detonations. Shields designed to withstand energy weapons shattered under the brutal physics of mass multiplied by velocity, and the fortresses began to die. "They're using primitive weapons," the Valkyrie defense coordinator shouted in disbelief. "Kinetic strikes. No one has used those in combat." 4. His station exploded as a human railgun round punched through the fortress's armor. The battle for Valkar Prime became a legend that would be told in hushed whispers for generations. The Valkyrie threw everything they had at the human fleet, and humanity just kept coming. Every destroyed human ship was replaced by 2 more jumping in from reserves. Every tactic the Valkyrie employed was countered by adaptations that came too fast to be organic thinking. The AI networks were learning and evolving in real time, becoming better at killing with every passing minute. Captain Rodriguez commanded the carrier group that broke through the inner defense perimeter. Her pilots flew attack craft that were little more than engines with guns attached. Fragile things that died easily, but moved with a speed and agility that made them almost impossible to hit. "Gold Squadron. Hammer and anvil on that command ship," she transmitted, watching her tactical display. "Silver Squadron, screen formation. Keep their fighters off Gold's approach." The Valkyrie had better fighters, better weapons, better everything except the one thing that mattered. They didn't have pilots who had grown up hearing stories about the 50,000 children and had spent every day since learning how to make someone pay for it. The Valkyrie defense fleet broke after 16 hours of continuous combat. Their ships retreated in disorder while human vessels pursued without mercy, running down every fleeing craft and destroying it with the mechanical efficiency of exterminators. Clearing vermin. Webb stood on his flagship's bridge as Valkar Prime filled the main viewport. The beautiful world with its silver towers and purple skies completely defenseless now. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving surrender offers from the surface. They're offering total capitulation, access to all military facilities. Anything we want." Webb looked at the planet and remembered watching the colony ships die. "Inform the surface that we don't want their facilities," he said, his voice empty of emotion. "Prepare the kinetic bombardment platforms." "Sir," the officer started to protest, then stopped when he saw Webb's expression. "Those are population centers down there," someone else said from the back of the bridge. "Civilians who had nothing to do with." "They had everything to do with it," Webb interrupted. Turning to face his crew, "They voted for it. They watched it happen and felt nothing. They built the ships that murdered children, and they slept soundly afterward." He walked to the communications station and opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Webb. I know what I'm ordering. I know what it makes us. Anyone who can't follow this order can stand down now with no punishment. Transfer to support vessel and go home with my respect." He waited, counting the seconds in his head. Not a single ship in his fleet stood down. "Begin bombardment." Webb ordered. "Military targets, only shipyards, manufacturing centers, weapons development facilities. We're not here to kill civilians. We're here to ensure the Valkyrie never build another ship capable of murdering children." The bombardment lasted 3 days when it ended. Valkyr Prime's industrial capacity had been reduced by 80%. The silver towers still stood. The civilians still lived. But the machinery of war that had seemed so invincible lay in ruins. Webb broadcast a message to the planet before his fleet departed. "This is what mercy looks like from humanity," he said, staring into the camera. "We could have turned your world to glass. We could have done to you what you did to our children. Instead, we leave you alive so you can remember what you cost yourselves when you voted for genocide." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on 40 worlds. Human forces struck with a coordination that terrified the Council species, who had always assumed humans were too emotional and disorganized to wage effective war. The reports flooding into the Council chamber painted a picture that seemed impossible. Human victories everywhere, Council forces in retreat, entire star systems going dark as human fleets systematically dismantled anything that could be used for military purposes. The Valkyrie Counselor, watching his civilization crumble in real time, finally understood what his people had unleashed. "They don't fight for territory," he whispered, staring at the tactical displays. "They don't fight for resources. They fight because we hurt them, and they won't stop until we hurt just as much." The Zephyrim representative, ancient beyond measure, spoke for the first time in the emergency session. "You asked me once what made humanity different from other young species," the Zephyrim said, its voice like wind through crystal. "I will tell you now, other species love their children. Humans are their children. You didn't just kill the young. You killed humanity's future. And now they will destroy yours." The Council voted to assemble a grand coalition fleet, the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. Humanity welcomed the news. They had been waiting for the galaxy to bring everything it had, because only then would the lesson be complete. The Grand Coalition fleet assembled at the Sigma Draconis system, and it was magnificent in a way that would have inspired poets if poets had been watching instead of tactical analysts. 10,000 warships from 12 different species, each one representing the pinnacle of their civilization's military engineering. The Tone Collective brought their massive dreadnoughts that could shatter moons with focused particle beams. The Zaltir contributed their stealth frigates that could slip through sensor nets like ghosts. Even the peaceful Curvan had sent hospital ships and support craft to aid their allies. The Coalition command staff met on the flagship Inevitable Victory, a Valkyrie supercarrier that stretched 5 kilometers from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. Admiral Velthanis stood before the assembled commanders and felt the weight of history on his shoulders. "We represent the combined might of civilized space," he said, his musical voice amplified to reach every officer in the vast conference chamber. 10,000 ships against a human force we estimate at no more than 15,000 vessels. Our technology is superior. Our experience spans millennia. Our cause is just. He activated the holographic display showing the tactical situation. The humans have been lured to this system by false intelligence suggesting a critical supply depot. They believe they will face minimal resistance. Instead, they will encounter overwhelming force and be crushed in a single decisive engagement. The Toon representative raised one of its 7 tentacles, its mechanical voice translator echoing in the chamber. "Probability of victory exceeds 97%, it stated. Human forces cannot withstand concentrated fire from this fleet. Their vessels are individually inferior. Their formations lack coordination by civilized standards. Their tactical doctrine relies on aggression over intelligence. Admiral Valthonis nodded, feeling confidence return after the shock of the past months. "We will break them here," he declared. "And then we will dictate terms that return the galaxy to proper order." The human fleet arrived 6 hours later, and nothing went according to the coalition's plan. General Webb watched the massive enemy formation appear on his tactical display and felt something close to satisfaction. They had fallen for the trap perfectly, assembling exactly where humanity wanted them. They brought everything, Captain Rodriguez said from her station, scanning the enemy fleet composition. Every capital ship, every strategic asset, everything they think makes them invincible. "Good," Webb replied, opening a channel to the entire human fleet. "All forces, initiate Omega Protocol." Omega Protocol was something humanity had developed in the darkest days after the colony ships died. A strategy so extreme that Webb had needed authorization from Earth's unified government to deploy it. Required humanity to sacrifice everything for victory. The coalition fleet detected the human approach and moved into formation. Elegant lines of battleships supported by screens of cruisers and destroyers. A textbook deployment that had won 1,000 battles over the centuries. The human fleet didn't form up at all. They came in scattered groups, apparently disorganized. Seemingly chaotic. Admiral Valthonis smiled at his tactical display. The humans were already making mistakes, their famous aggression overcoming their tactical sense. "All ships, weapons range in 30 seconds, his tactical officer reported. "Firing solutions locked. Fire at will," Valthonis ordered. And the coalition fleet opened up 10,000 warships, unleashing their weapons. Simultaneously, created a light show visible from planets several systems away. Particle beams and plasma torpedoes and rail gun rounds filled the space between the fleets with enough destructive energy to vaporize small moons. The human ships didn't try to dodge, they flew straight into the barrage. Shields flaring and dying, armor ablating under the onslaught. Hundreds of vessels simply ceasing to exist in the first volley. But the ones that survived kept coming. "They're not breaking off," the tactical officer shouted in disbelief. "Casualties at 40%, and they're still advancing." Then the human ships began to change. What the coalition had thought were warships suddenly transformed, their outer hulls detaching to reveal something underneath. Not more weapons, but docking clamps and grappling systems and breaching equipment. They were boarding craft, evasive maneuvers. Valthonis screamed, but it was too late. The human ships were among them now, latching onto coalition vessels like parasites. And then the real nightmare began. Humanity had brought Marines Captain Sarah. Chen led her company through the breach in the Tomb Dreadnought's hull, her powered armor making her faster and stronger than any organic being had a right to be. Tomb defenders opened fire with plasma rifles that should have melted her squad into slag. But human armor was built by people who had spent 6 months imagining what they would need to survive in Hell. Chun's rifle spit depleted uranium rounds at hypersonic velocity. Her squad moved like a single organism, flowing around obstacles and overwhelming resistance with a speed that left the Tomb defenders unable to react. "Bridge is 3 decks up," her tactical AI whispered in her ear, overlaying a route on her helmet display. "Resistance level moderate. Estimated time to objective 4 minutes." They reached the bridge in 3. Tomb Captain tried to initiate self-destruct protocols, his tentacles moving across controls with desperate speed. Chun shot the console out from under him, then pointed her rifle at his main sensory cluster. "Surrender your ship or die," she said simply, her voice flat through the armor's external speakers. "You have 5 seconds to decide." The Tomb Captain looked at her and saw something in the humans. posture that terrified him more than death. She genuinely didn't care which option he chose. "I surrender," he whispered across the battlefield. Similar scenes repeated 1,000 times. Human boarding parties took control of coalition ships faster than the fleet could respond, turning the enemy's own vessels against them. Admiral Velthenis watched his perfect formation collapse into chaos as ship after ship went dark or suddenly began firing on its own allies. "How are they coordinating this?" he demanded, staring at the tactical display that showed impossible timing and precision. "There's no communication lag, no command delays." Aye, sir," his science officer reported, her voice shaking. "They're using AI networks for tactical coordination. Response times are measured in microseconds instead of seconds." "That's illegal," Velthenis shouted. As if the law mattered anymore, the coalition fleet began to fracture. Captains who had trained for elegant warfare found themselves fighting an enemy that used their own ships against them. That appeared from impossible angles. That simply refused to die, no matter how many were killed. General Webb watched the battle unfold from his command ship, 300,000 kilometers from the main engagement. "Sir, we've lost 40% of our assault force," his tactical officer reported. "But we've captured or disabled 62% of the enemy fleet." "Acceptable," Webb said, knowing that every lost ship represented hundreds of dead crew members and not letting himself feel it because feeling would make him hesitate. "Continue the assault." Then something new appeared on the tactical display. Massive energy signatures building in the center of the human fleet. "What are those?" Rodriguez asked, highlighting the readings. "Relativistic kill vehicles," Webb said quietly. "We loaded asteroids into mass drivers and accelerated them to 0.8 light speed. They've been coasting in stealth mode for the past 3 hours, and now they're here." The RKVs hit the coalition flagship like the wrath of an angry god. There was no defense against something moving that fast. No shield that could stop that much kinetic energy. The inevitable victory simply ceased to exist. Replaced by an expanding cloud of plasma and debris, the coalition fleet broke 10,000 ships, representing the combined might of 12 civilizations, turned and ran while human vessels pursued them system by system, destroying stragglers without mercy. Webb opened a channel to all coalition forces, a broadcast that would be recorded and replayed across the galaxy for generations. "This is General Marcus Webb of the Human Forces," he said, his voice carrying across space. "You came here to crush us, to put us back in our place, to make us accept that the strong dictate terms to the weak." He paused, watching coalition ships scatter across his tactical display like frightened children. "Instead, you have learned what we learned when you killed our children. That mercy is not weakness, and kindness is not surrender. You taught us that the galaxy only respects force, so we have become force itself." The last coalition battleship jumped to hyperspace, leaving humanity victorious, but Webb felt no joy. Only the cold satisfaction of a job not yet finished. The galaxy had more lessons to learn. The broadcast reached every inhabited world in the galaxy simultaneously, transmitted on all frequencies, in all languages. Impossible to ignore or suppress. General Webb's face filled screens from the core worlds to the outer rim, and behind him stood the ruins of the Galactic Council chamber itself. Human Marines had taken the station without firing a shot, the Council representatives fleeing before humanity's advance, like the bureaucrats they had always been. "My name is Marcus Webb," he began, his voice tired but unyielding, "and I speak for humanity across the galaxy." Billions of beings watched and listened, some in fear, some in anger, a few in something approaching understanding. 18 months ago, the Galactic Council voted to destroy 7 colony ships carrying 50,000 human children. Webb continued, And behind him, the memorial wall lit up with 50,000 photographs, every child who had died. Their faces smiling and innocent and gone forever. The council called it enforcement of law. They called it resource management. They called it necessary for the greater good of civilized space. He paused, letting the faces of the dead children fill the screens. We call it murder. The Valkyrie homeworld listened in silence. Their cities still stood, but their shipyards were ash. Their military bases were rubble. Their certainty that they represented the pinnacle of civilization had been shattered along with their fleets for 18 months. Humanity has waged war across this galaxy, Webb said, his hands gripping the podium in front of him. We have destroyed fleets, conquered worlds, and demonstrated capabilities that you did not believe we possessed. He gestured to someone off-screen, and the view shifted to show a tactical map of the galaxy red zones showing human-controlled space, which now included 40% of all inhabited systems. We could continue. Our fleets are still strong. Our people are still committed. We could reduce every council world to pre-industrial conditions and salt the earth behind us. The Toon Collective's leadership watched from their crystal command center, their mathematical minds racing through probability calculations that all pointed to the same conclusion: humanity could do exactly what Webb threatened. But that is not who we choose to be, Webb said. And the camera returned to his face. We did not come to your galaxy seeking conquest. We came seeking fellowship, knowledge, a place among the stars where our children could grow and thrive. His voice hardened. You taught us that such dreams were foolish. You taught us that power is the only language the galaxy understands. You taught us that caring about others is a weakness to be exploited. Behind him, the memorial wall cycled through images. Children laughing, playing, learning, living the lives that had been stolen from them. So here are the terms that humanity will accept. Not negotiate, not discuss, accept. The galaxy held its breath. First, the Galactic Council is dissolved immediately. Every representative, every bureaucrat, every functionary who voted for genocide will be removed from power. Protests erupted on a dozen worlds. But Webb continued without pause. Second, a new accord of free worlds will be established. With one fundamental law that supersedes all others: no species may commit genocide. No matter the justification, no matter the legal framework, no matter the perceived necessity, the Zephyr representative, watching from their crystal tower, nodded slowly. This was a law they could support. Third, the Valkyrie civilization will be reduced to a single world. Not destroyed, not exterminated, but confined. They will stand as a living monument to the price of cruelty, a reminder that even the mighty can fall when they forget that other beings matter. On Velkar Prime, citizens watched their former glory reduced to a historical footnote and understood that this was mercy, however harsh it seemed. Fourth, every species in this galaxy will contribute to building a memorial station at the site where the colony ships died. 50,000 lights will burn there eternally, one for each child. And human ships will guard that station until the stars themselves grow cold. Webb leaned forward, his eyes seeming to stare through the camera at every being watching. And fifth, humanity will remain armed, ready, and vigilant. We will never again trust that the galaxy will do the right thing simply because it is right. We will be the enforcement arm of the new accord. And if any species decides that genocide is an acceptable tool of policy, they will face what the Valkyrie faced. He stepped back from the podium. These terms are not negotiable. You have 72 hours to signal your acceptance. Any species that refuses will be treated as hostile and dealt with accordingly. The transmission ended for 6 hours. The galaxy was silent. Governments debated. Military forces positioned themselves. Species tried to determine if they could resist humanity's demands. Then, The Zephrams sent their response, a single word in the ancient language that predated the council. Agreed, within 24 hours. 200 species had signaled acceptance. The remaining 12 species tried to form a resistance coalition. Talking of ancient pride and refusing to bow to upstart humans, Captain Rodriguez led the fleet that visited each of those 12 species' homeworlds. She didn't fire a shot, didn't threaten, didn't even make demands. She simply entered orbit and transmitted footage of the Battle of Sigma Draconis, showing what happened when the galaxy's combined might faced humanity's wrath. All 12 species signaled acceptance within hours. The construction of the memorial station took 6 months. Every species contributed materials, labor, and resources, building a structure that dwarfed even the largest space stations in the galaxy. General Webb stood at the dedication ceremony, watching as 50,000 lights ignited simultaneously, each one representing a life cut short, a future stolen, a dream that would never be realized. Former Ambassador Chun stood beside him, her diplomat's robes replaced by a military uniform that somehow suited her better. Was it worth it? She asked quietly, watching the lights. All the death, all the destruction, all the change we forced on the galaxy. Was it worth it? Webb looked at the memorial, at the lights that would burn forever, at the human warships patrolling the perimeter. Ask me again in 100 years, he said. When a species somewhere considers genocide, remembers what happened to the last ones who tried it. Ask me when those lives are saved because we made the galaxy too afraid to repeat history. Chime nodded slowly. The galaxy calls us monsters now, she observed. Good, Webb replied. Let them fear us. Fear will keep them honest when morality fails. The memorial station became a destination for pilgrims from across the galaxy. Beings came to see the lights, to read the names, to understand what humanity had lost and what price the galaxy had paid for that loss. Some came to mourn. Some came to learn. A few came to apologize. Captain Rodriguez led the security detail that protected the station, her ships patrolling in shifts that never ended, her crews rotating but never leaving the memorial unguarded. How long will we maintain this vigil? A young lieutenant asked her during one patrol shift. Rodriguez looked at the 50,000 lights burning in the void, each one a promise and a warning. Forever, she said simply. We have a saying, lest we forget. We will stand watch until the stars die, because the moment we forget is the moment someone decides it's safe to do it again. The lieutenant nodded, accepting the weight of eternal duty. Below them, the memorial lights burned around them. The new Accord of Free Worlds struggled to build a different kind of Galaxy One, where laws had meaning beyond bureaucratic convenience, where the strong had responsibilities to the weak, where children of any species could dream of the future without fear. It wasn't a perfect galaxy. Humanity's methods had been brutal. The war had cost millions of lives across dozens of species. The scars would take generations to heal, but it was a galaxy where genocide was no longer an acceptable tool of policy, where bureaucrats couldn't vote for mass murder and then move on to the next agenda item, where the weak had protectors who would burn worlds to defend them. General Webb retired 5 years after the war ended. His hair turned white, his hands shaking from stress disorders that would never fully heal. He spent his final days in a small house on Earth, tending a garden and refusing all interviews, all requests to justify or explain the decisions he had made. Only visitors he accepted were the families of the children who had died. They came to thank him, to curse him, to ask questions he couldn't answer about whether their child's death had meaning. He listened to them all, never defending himself, never claiming the war had been necessary or right. I did what I believed had to be done, he told one mother whose daughter had been 6 years old when the Valkyrie destroyed her ship. But that doesn't make it just, and it doesn't bring her back. The mother looked at him with eyes full of pain and understanding. No, she agreed. but it means no other mother will lose her child the same way. Webb died quietly in his sleep 10 years after the war, and the galaxy he left behind was fundamentally different from the one he had known. The Galactic Council was gone, replaced by an accord that valued consensus over decree. The Valkyrie were shadows of their former glory, their single world a living lesson in the consequences of cruelty, and humanity stood watch over the memorial station. 50,000 lights burning in the darkness, guarded by ships that would never stand down. The galaxy had learned its lesson well. Humanity would forgive many things,